Infinite Evolution, starting with Captain America Serum. Chapter 21. What's going on? Inside the Hydra base's monitoring room, Commander Jensen burst in, yelling, "Where did the explosion happen?" The technician was about to pull up the surveillance footage when a piercing alarm blared throughout the laboratory. Beep. 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 Immediately after, the surveillance screen automatically displayed a scene, with 4 figures flashing by, blurry but full of oppressive power. What is it? Find out. Under the technician's processing, the blurred image quickly became clear, and Josie's image appeared before their eyes. That's the Serum mutant that escaped from the Second Research Institute. Looking at the terrifying image, Jensen's expression changed drastically, and he shrieked, "How could he be here? Could it be? This person was indeed an elite capable of managing a base." Jensen's mind raced, and he immediately recalled a crucial piece of intelligence provided by Dr. Zola earlier. X-17 had once destroyed the Second Research Institute, suspected of taking away the core database. If the other party had deciphered the data within, all Hydra bases in the California region would likely have been exposed to him. Is that even possible? The protection of that database was personally designed by Dr. Zola and was the most advanced computer system in the world at the time. Even if X-17's brain had been enhanced, only his existing knowledge and thinking speed would have improved. It was absolutely impossible for an ordinary Chinese youth who hadn't even attended university to master such complex electronic offense and defense technology in a short time. Unless, there's only one possibility. Jensen's face suddenly changed, and a terrifying guess emerged in his mind. The degree of X-17's brain enhancement far exceeded the scope of a super soldier. He broke through decades of Hydra's technological accumulation with only 3 months of self-study. What terrified him even more was that the attacking enemy was not just one person. The 3 combat devices in the footage, resembling steel giants, were remarkably similar to a project that had long been bankrupt and shelved at shield-powered armor. How on earth did he do it? For a moment, Jensen felt his scalp tingle, and his heart felt as if it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, almost unable to breathe. Taking a deep breath, he quickly regained his composure. He had to make the right judgment. Escape. We must escape. Evacuate immediately. With the terrifying strength X-17 displayed, they couldn't resist at all, let alone with 3 sets of powered armor coordinating the attack. Immediately activate all isolation barriers. We must stop them at the perimeter. In this life or death crisis, Jensen roared, notify all researchers to evacuate immediately through the escape routes. Also, send people to the data warehouse to destroy all research data. This. The technician beside him paused, then cautiously confirmed, "Sir, do we really need to destroy all data? Get out of my way." Time was short, and Jensen couldn't be bothered with pleasantries. He kicked the technician aside and personally took over the control panel. At the same time, he coldly ordered the 2 soldiers behind him, "You 2 take a team to the central database. Remember, you must destroy all data related to life extension technology and cell repair technology." "Yes, sir." Watching the 2 quickly leave, Jensen's brows furrowed, his expression grim. In fact, he had an even more dangerous suspicion in his heart. Had X-17 already recreated the complete formula for the super serum? The 3 figures in the footage, their running speed comparable to a cheetah's, the destructive power that could shatter a soldier with one punch, the reaction speed that easily dodged dense bullet rain. Were the qualities they displayed truly just the effect of powered exoskeletons? Could an ordinary person's physical fitness truly bear such a massive steel construct, and truly make such reflexive movements? It clearly seemed more like true super soldiers. No, I must notify Dr. Zola and Baron Strucker immediately. If X-17 truly possesses such heaven-defying power, Hydra's strength simply cannot resist him. But before he could act, an invisible thread silently swept past his limbs. The next moment, bright red blood splattered on the keyboard, and Jensen's body went limp, falling heavily to the ground. Several seconds later, the intense pain finally spread from his limbs to his brain. He was horrified to discover that all members in the control room, including himself, had fallen to the ground simultaneously, blood seeping from their limbs, completely unable to move. He tried hard to prop himself up, but only met with waves of excruciating pain. His hands and feet were completely useless, intense gunfire echoed continuously, and screams rose and fell. Josie's psychic power was like an invisible net, covering a 100-meter radius, constantly monitoring the movements of Jensen and other core Hydra members. Almost the moment he stepped into the experimental base, all heavy weaponry had been destroyed. It must be said that this base commander was indeed extraordinary. Within mere tens of seconds of discovering their intrusion, he was able to quickly make the most correct judgments, and even might have guessed some key information. If there had been no psychic detection, or if communication jamming hadn't been set up in advance, the other party might really have transmitted some of his information, triggering a full-scale investigation by Hydra. Unfortunately, Josie was fully prepared. Before his own strength was powerful enough to contend with all threats, he needed to constantly remind himself what kind of world he was in. There were too many strange weapons in Marvel. A slight carelessness could lead to a disastrous setback. He had to be careful, always. At the same time, a trace of emotion couldn't help but arise in his heart. Hydra truly had a wealth of talent. Whether it was Takahashi Naoko or Jensen, they were all geniuses, one in a million. Yet, they chose to stand against him. What a pity. Pity my ass, anyone who tries to harm me, kill them all, there's nothing to pity. Josie immediately corrected this thought. I am the victim, these are all bad people who made me suffer torture. They must be eradicated as soon as possible, otherwise, the consequences will be endless. This kind of thinking is very undesirable, I must learn from it. After more than 10 minutes, the gunfire gradually subsided, finally falling completely silent. Without heavy firepower support, and unable to mobilize the base's defensive facilities, the security force of less than 100 people had almost no room to resist against Joseph and the three others. The bullets fired couldn't even touch the edges of their battle suits. There was no tactical coordination, no need for flanking maneuvers, they simply pushed through without any suspense. After a battle, the three of them sweated less than they did on the 50-kilometer journey. Tap, tap. Rhythmic footsteps slowly approached, and the concrete floor subtly vibrated with them. Jensen, bleeding profusely, leaned against the corner of the wall, a huge shadow falling over him, obscuring his blurry vision. Only then did he finally see Josie's appearance clearly. This is simply God's unparalleled perfect creation. This thought involuntarily emerged in his mind. A face as handsome as an angel, a majestic body like a god of war, eyes with black pupils that glowed with captivating wisdom, and an oppressive aura subtly emanating from him. All proclaimed the perfection and invincibility of the being before him. With just one glance, Jensen seemed to have already foreseen Hydra's ultimate fate of defeat. Does this world truly allow such a being to exist? He couldn't help but ask himself. Ignoring the other party, Josie took out a handheld computer from his pocket, connected it to the base system, and easily completed the authority takeover, completely controlling the entire experimental base. He glanced at the dying Jensen on the ground and personally sent him on his way. Afterward, he headed straight for the data center. He quickly copied all the data, dismantled the core server, and took it with him. Then he went to the experimental area and obtained 6 or 7 types of semi-finished gene samples, including life extension agents, bioenergy liquid, and cryogenic freezing liquid. Of course, he also conveniently packed up the advanced instruments in the base that could be used. Hydra's scientific research level was top-tier globally. Most of the equipment could not be bought on the market, so it couldn't be wasted. Before leaving, Josie released the imprisoned test subjects and gave them some advice, telling them to flee for their lives. As for whether they could escape Hydra's pursuit, that depended on their luck. Additionally, during Lena's sweep of the base, she discovered a Hydra squad desperately escorting an Asian woman to an evacuation train. She seemed to be an important figure. Earlier, when he scanned the base, he had noticed this woman who was being held separately, and had paid her some attention. When he searched for her in the database, there was indeed a surprise. The woman's name was Jiang, from a small mountain village in China. She was specifically held by Hydra because she possessed a special self-healing and longevity ability. Based on her information, Josie immediately found the corresponding character in his mind. Wasn't she Jiang, the mother of Daisy Johnson Quake, from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? In his memory, this woman's experience was quite tragic. During World War II, she was captured by Daniel Whitehall and used as a test subject for the obelisk experiment, miraculously surviving. 40 years later, she was again arrested by Hydra, brutally dismembered for research, and miraculously survived again. But there were always people coveting the secrets of her body. In short, it was all a case of, a man's wealth is his ruin. However, none of this concerned Josie. He merely extracted a portion of blood from this mutant named Jiang, as a superpower sample, considering it an unexpected gain, and didn't pay attention to anything else. Accompanied by a deafening roar, the second Hydra base turned into a sea of fire. While Baron Strucker and Daniel Whitehall were furious over the destruction of the research institute, Josie and his 3 companions had long since driven away with a car full of spoils of war. On the outskirts of New York, a convoy traveled tirelessly. After 2 days, Josie and his group traveled day and night, crossing over 3,000 kilometers, finally arriving at this world-renowned international city. Not far ahead was the intersection leading to the city center. On the navigation screen in the driver's cabin, 7 or 8 red and yellow light dots constantly flickered. Those were Federal Police and SHIELD patrol cars, checking vehicles one by one on the way to the city. Go around it. In the communication channel, Josie's calm voice sounded, "We're going directly to Philadelphia." Almost simultaneously, the navigation system replanned a safe and quick route. Lena, driving the heavy truck, frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Sir, there are police and SHIELD everywhere, could something be wrong?" "Don't worry." In the carriage, Josie leaned comfortably in the corner. While flipping through a psychology book in his hand, he chuckled softly, "It's still about Stark Industries. The attack on Howard and his son has an impact no less than that of the current president who's full of wild ideas. What's more, it also involves the super soldier from the Soviet Union. Under such circumstances, they naturally wouldn't relax their vigilance." Soviet Union. Lena keenly caught a key point. "Sir, do you mean that the person who attacked Howard this time was a super soldier dispatched by the Soviet Union?" Josie shook his head and continued to explain. "Nominally a Soviet super soldier, but actually controlled by Hydra." With that, he told the 3 about the origin of the super soldier and SHIELD, including the origin of the Serum, the history of Captain America, and the role Hydra played in it. SHIELD was initially led by Howard. Its predecessor was the U.S. Strategic Scientific Reserve, SSR, which was later renamed the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division, SHIELD. It wasn't until around 1980 that, under the name of an America Security Organization, it officially began large-scale cooperation with multiple countries, started expanding, and gradually appeared in the public eye. It was during this period that Hydra, under the manipulation of Dr. Zola, began to infiltrate it on a large scale. After listening, all 3 showed a look of sudden realization. No wonder the boss of Stark Industries was easily assassinated, it turns out it was an internal conflict. Lena's crisp laugh echoed in the communication channel, a bit schadenfreude. "What you're saying is a bit extreme." Josie couldn't help but chuckle at this. Although Stark Industries isn't exactly benevolent, compared to Hydra, it still has a bit of integrity. "Anyway, in my opinion, there's not much difference." Lena looked displeased, her tone full of hostility. "They're all just running dogs of imperialism and aristocratic syndicates." It could be seen that this female warrior from Sokovia had a natural aversion to superpowers and the aristocratic class. This was not surprising. Lena came from a small Eastern European country, long caught in the ideological struggle between East and West, coupled with the extreme corruption of her country's old aristocracy and military political system, where the people were long in poverty and hunger. Having risen from the bottom, her stance was naturally thus. "All right, let's not talk about these things." Josie actively ended the topic. "We'll go to Philadelphia first to avoid the attention of the Snake Shield Bureau, which will facilitate subsequent actions." Lena was about to say something more when she suddenly heard the term, Snake Shield Bureau. After a slight stun, she burst out laughing. "Snake Shield Bureau. Sir, that name is too apt." "Right. I also think it's quite vivid. But if SHIELD agents heard it, they'd probably arrest you on the spot." Josie shrugged, saying indifferently, "I'm just speaking the truth. Freedom of speech is a fundamental right of every citizen, as President Roosevelt himself said." Lena's charming big eyes blinked, and she giggled. Sir, you still believe in such things? Drive your car properly. Why are you so talkative today? With that, Josie reached out from the car window and lightly tapped the girl's forehead. Ignoring her aggrieved look, he refocused his attention on the computer screen. On the monitor, an encrypted email popped up dramatically. It's here. Josie clicked on the email, looking at the unusually brief information on it, and chuckled softly. It seems Stark Industries isn't doing so well, they couldn't hold out for even 2 days. The body of the email was simple, just one sentence, what do you want? But the sender was not simple at all. It was Howard Stark's wife, Maria Stark. This was actually expected. A day ago, Josie hacked into Stark Industries' internal network and, using an America Communications satellite, sent Maria a special video. The entire process of repairing paralyzed white mice using bioenergy fluid. Not long after, business came knocking. Considering the intelligence he had gathered these past few days, Josie was not surprised at all. Information showed that the America military and government were discussing whether to continue deep cooperation with Stark Industries. At the same time, the company also experienced multiple management and security issues. And behind all this chaos, the shadow of Hydra was everywhere. According to the original timeline, after Howard and his wife met an unfortunate end, a 21-year-old Tony Stark quickly inherited the company. In a very short time, he not only maintained the stable operation of Stark Industries but also shifted it from traditional military industry to high-end energy, AI, and cutting-edge technology, rising very quickly. The extraordinary wisdom and political skill he displayed were no less than his father's, perhaps even superior. But now, Tony Stark, due to Josie's butterfly effect, was severely injured and became a disabled person, making the situation very grim. If not for Howard's deep political and business connections, plus the assistance of the old butler Jarvis to help Maria stabilize the situation, Stark Industries would probably have been silently carved up and dismembered by various syndicates long ago. You know, they were in the free and democratic United States. Josie was deep in thought. Just as he was considering how to reply, a large red exclamation mark suddenly popped up on the computer screen. Warning. Data channel encountering write-back interference. Alert. Suspected forged callback signal. Virus intrusion. His gaze swept over the warning, Josie's expression unchanged, mental energy surged out, instantly awakening the backup server nodes in the entire carriage. Noticing the anomaly behind the carriage, Lena in the driver's seat asked with a serious expression, Sir, what happened? Nothing, just a minor issue. Josie waved his hand, his tone still relaxed, turn on the chiller. I'd like to see which genius it is. As his voice fell, dozens of micro-node supercomputers, harvested from the Hydra base and enhanced with 21st century technology, began full operation, performing precise analysis and counter-tracking of the abnormal data flow. Soon, a seemingly normal but meaningless binary code repeatedly appeared with a special pattern, hidden within the quiet data stream. Got you. Josie watched the screen, tapping his fingertip on the desktop. Tisk, you even left a signature in there. So confident. The screen popped up a set of blurry parameter tags, TSK, X Protojarv version 0.2. JARV. Could it be? His eyes lit up slightly, a hint of curiosity flashing in them. Tony Stark, at just 19 years old, can write this level of boot program. Tisk tisk, a super genius indeed lives up to his reputation. Josie pressed a key, the cursor flickered, and a message was quietly sent. Communication was then cut off, and the entire line went completely silent. He watched the red exclamation mark on the display gradually extinguish, then leaned back gently into his chair, thinking, since you want to find me, well, let's talk. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or for some other reason. As his last command was sent, a momentary vulnerability appeared in Stark Industries' network defense. A piece of information about Umbrella Corporation and a special therapeutic agent was coincidentally intercepted by Hydra's spy program. At the same time, the Snake Shield Bureau began to become active. Downtown New York City, Manhattan. Inside a super-sized laboratory near the top floor of the Stark Industries headquarters building, lights blazed, and electronic equipment hummed incessantly. A young man sat in front of the central control terminal, his eyes fixed on the screen, his fingers rapidly typing on the keyboard. Countless data streams and code flowed like a tide across his vision, densely interwoven, forming a complex data waterfall, as if to drag an unknown enemy out of the virtual world. But no matter how hard he tried, the signal he was tracking was like a mirage, he simply couldn't discern the opponent's true identity. Finally, a prompt popped up on the screen. TISC JARV, signal channel lost. Shit. Tony Stark slammed his fist on the table, cursing in frustration. Roughly wiping the sweat from his forehead, he quickly switched back to the data log, repeatedly analyzing the fragmented data snippets he had intercepted, trying to find even the slightest clue. Did I fail again? Tony closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair, feeling the exhaustion in his body and the numbness in his lower half, a shadow clouding his brow. He finally had to admit that even a genius like himself couldn't compete with the other party in terms of data penetration and tracking. Father. His thoughts involuntarily drifted back to that night half a month ago. The assassin had silently infiltrated the mansion, moving through the fully armed security system as if it were flat ground. He didn't even have time to react before he was punched a dozen meters away, slamming heavily into a steel beam, his spine snapping instantly. And his father, who had always been cold and distant, had resolutely stood in front of the assailant, fighting desperately alone to buy him time, falling into a near-death state. Recalling the scene, Tony's emotions were incredibly complex. Afterward, Stark Industries mobilized all its resources, but still couldn't stop his father's injuries from worsening. 2 days ago, the doctors officially delivered the ultimatum. Howard Stark could only last for less than a month. Just as everyone was at a loss, an anonymous email sent to his mother caught her attention. What shocked him even more was the experimental video attached to the email. The bioenergy liquid displayed in it could repair the nervous system of paralyzed mice. If the technology was real, it could not only save his father but also allow him to stand up again. Impatient, he secretly implanted a tracking virus into his mother's reply email, attempting to trace the sender's identity. But he underestimated his opponent's caution and power. Now, he might have, due to his momentary recklessness, alerted the enemy and personally cut off his father's last glimmer of hope. He didn't know how much time had passed. As Tony was consumed by self-blame and regret over his mistake, the computer screen suddenly lit up, and an email popped up forcefully without warning, a red and white umbrella logo occupying the entire display interface. Umbrella. Tony Stark, if you want to save your father, give me something I'm interested in. Below the email, a map annotation was attached, clearly pointing to a city, Philadelphia. There's still a chance. Tony looked at the short message, and surprise and hope instantly filled his entire being. After a moment of hesitation, he made a decision to seek help. Due to his own impulsiveness, he had almost missed an opportunity, and he couldn't act alone anymore. He needed his mother and Jarvis to handle this matter together. With the aid of his mechanical exoskeleton, Tony slowly stood up and walked with difficulty out of the lab. Mr. Jarvis, what do you think? Inside the Stark Industries CEO's office, Maria spoke with a solemn expression. I largely agree with Tony's opinion. The tall and upright Jarvis, though over 70, was still energetic, meticulously analyzing the current situation. This matter must not involve the military or the government. This umbrella organization's goal is most likely Stark Industries technology. Once the military knows, they would rather sacrifice Howard than allow any form of technology exchange. This would touch upon their core interests. We'd best handle it ourselves. Jarvis looked at Maria, his tone firm. As long as Howard can recover, any subsequent problems will naturally be resolved. Maria and Tony exchanged glances, nodding almost simultaneously. They also thought the same. But dealing with such unknown individuals must not be taken lightly. Jarvis continued, the opponent's electronic attack methods are extremely sophisticated, even capable of silently infiltrating our and the military's satellite systems. It's very difficult for one person to achieve this. We have reason to suspect that Umbrella might have a large technical team behind it, or even be controlled by a certain superpower. To obtain the bioenergy liquid from them, we must be fully prepared, or we could easily fall into a trap. At this point, he paused for a moment, then thoughtfully added, I can contact Ms. Carter. If we can get assistance from S.H.I.E.L.D., it might provide an extra layer of security. In that case, Jarvis, I'll trouble you. Maria let out a long breath, a hint of fatigue in her eyes. Too many people are watching me inside and outside the company, so it's not convenient for me to act. This time, you and Tony will handle it. She turned to Tony, gently stroking her son's hair with a tender gaze, and softly said, My child, you've grown up. Your father would be proud of you. Remember, you must protect yourself. Tony would be the lead in this transaction with Umbrella. The night was deep, and a distinctive black Shield transport plane swept across the sky, its turbine blades stirring up turbulent air currents. Inside the cabin, Peggy Carter, dressed in a sharp black suit, her silver-gray short hair neat and tidy, calmly reviewed a top-secret document encrypted and sent by Jarvis. On the electronic document, the words, Umbrella, were highlighted in red. The accompanying video content made the veteran agent's eyes narrow slightly. In the clear images, a white mouse recovered from paralysis in mere seconds. Cellular regeneration, non-invasive life extension. Peggy knew exactly what this meant. The related technology involved, once confirmed safe and stable, would have an impact so immense it would be comparable to a political nuclear explosion. It would undoubtedly attract the attention of global powers and even trigger a frantic pursuit among syndicates. Life, longevity. For capital giants and those at the pinnacle of power, it was the key of the gods to perpetuate their authority, the ultimate goal they pursued their entire lives. Umbrella, what kind of force is it exactly? What exactly do they want? Peggy rubbed her slightly throbbing temples, closed the tablet in her hand, and took a deep breath. Director, we'll arrive at Stark Tower in 5 minutes, the pilot's report came through her earpiece. Also, the 3rd Howling Commando Unit has assembled and is expected to arrive in New York within 3 hours. Have them gather at the secret location, don't attract attention, she instructed curtly. Understood. Meanwhile, far away at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, in a dimly lit, quiet office. Defense Secretary Mitchell Carson sat in front of the communication control console, his face grim as he stared at the screen before him. The image displayed was a surveillance shot of Peggy Carter at the airport before boarding the plane. A sneer flashed in his eyes as he lowered his gaze to an encrypted file in his hand. The content was strikingly consistent with the information Peggy possessed, an intelligence report about Umbrella, and a certain special treatment technology lay quietly on the paper. Mitchell Carson snorted coldly and immediately dialed an encrypted channel. A moment later, a sinister face, very familiar to Joe Z, appeared on the screen, Hydra high-ranking official, Baron Strucker. Baron, Peggy Carter has departed for New York to contact Stark Industries. They may be preparing to engage with Umbrella. As that email confirmed as authentic. Dr. Zola personally verified it, there's no doubt, Carson nodded, confirming, Stark Industries is acting covertly. Very good. Keep a close eye on them. Strucker's voice was hoarse and cold, like a venomous snake hissing in one's ear, as he gave a chilling order, I will send the Winter Soldier to assist your operation. If there's an opportunity, capture this Umbrella alive and obtain the treatment technology. Yes, Baron. After hanging up the call, Mitchell Carson began to mobilize Hydra forces within S.H.I.E.L.D., converging them towards New York. It was the darkest hour of the early morning, before the sun had risen. On the outskirts of Philadelphia, a small farm nestled among trees. The 3-story wooden house was slightly weathered, and the floor was stained with fresh blood. In the woods behind, Allie tossed 2 bodies, covered in tattoos and wearing leather jackets, into a pit and carefully buried them with a shovel. Splash. A large basin of clear water was splashed onto the floor inside the house, and the bloodstains seeped into the cracks along the wood grain, quickly washing away. Cleanup complete. Joseph extinguished the half-smoked cigarette in his hand and said casually, I'll go check the defenses on the east side, see if there are any weak spots. I'll check the west side. Ali rinsed off the stains on his body and responded briefly. 4 hours ago, this place was a criminal stronghold for a group of gang drug dealers. Now, it had changed owners. In the nearby warehouse, a crisp sound could be heard. Josie sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, eyes slightly closed, his mental power flowing like threads, skillfully manipulating a pile of mechanical parts in front of him, rapidly assembling a precisely structured multifunctional drone. Lena, beside him, was equally focused on testing the drones, connecting them to the tactical terminal of her powered exoskeleton, and then deploying them in batches to various parts of the farm for automated patrol missions. After more than 2 hours of continuous work, having built over 30 drones, he finally felt a hint of fatigue. Whoosh! Exhaling a long breath, Josie opened his eyes, and a wisp of silver light disappeared. It's been 2 months, and my telekinetic power has increased by nearly 500 grams, with no signs of slowing down for now. It seems the fusion effect of the touch of calamity is still working. This is a continuous optimization process. The only thing that bothered him was that his body size was still growing, having already surpassed the 3-meter mark. If this continues, I might really turn into an Ultraman one day. Fortunately, the plan was progressing steadily. With a slight thought, information emerged from his mind. Infinite Furnace. Josie, Ephemera, High Tier. Innate Bloodline 1/1, Infinite Serum, Bronzed Normal 3.4% Touch of Calamity. Life Attributes 61 Right Pointing Arrow 65 Strength 14, Constitution 16, Agility 14, Spirit 21. Bloodline Imprints 3/6 Ironwool, Longant Normal 15%, Photographic Memory, Longant Normal 8%, Wisdom Insight, Special. Life Essence, 39/60. Smelting Materials. Spacetime Particles, Bronze Fragment 0.6%, Life Surge, Longant Normal 12%. World Residency Time, 318 days 02 hours 16 minutes 23 seconds, Rule Adaptability 10.4%. Note: 7 units of Life Essence daily. After the Touch of Calamity merged into the Infinite Serum, his 4-dimensional attributes further improved, especially Spirit and Constitution, and the daily accumulation of Life Essence also increased accordingly. 3 days ago, among the large number of experimental materials plundered from the Hydra base, in addition to the preliminary refinement of bioenergy liquid, he also successfully extracted a highly promising new talent, Life Surge, from Jiang, the Inhuman's blood sample, through the Infinite Furnace. According to Josie's memory of Jiang's superpowers, this was a supercellular regeneration ability that used the absorption of others' life as a medium to quickly heal her own injuries and delay aging. In the plot, Jiang was vivisected by Daniel Whitehall, and her remaining body was reanimated after being stitched together by her husband, Calvin Zabo, with her abilities becoming even stronger. Now, this talent, after deep optimization by the Infinite Furnace, already possessed even greater evolutionary potential. Thinking of this, Josie's anticipation grew. Not only that, he had also developed another hidden ability of the Infinite Furnace, black technology smelting. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a new function. It had always existed, but had simply not been discovered before. In short, the Infinite Furnace was not limited to the smelting of serums, potions, or extraordinary genetic substances. All things, myriad objects, could be smelted. For example, the powered exoskeleton Josie personally built. Due to his limited knowledge reserves and immature technology, it had many flaws, offering only basic combat assistance, and only super soldier level physiques could withstand its enormous load. After going through the Infinite Furnace, many technical flaws were automatically optimized, and its stability, maneuverability, and combat performance were greatly improved. The originally auxiliary-grade exoskeleton was elevated to powered armor, a super-simplified version of the Iron Man suit. More importantly, Josie could directly imitate and learn the technical structure and knowledge system optimized by the furnace, further improving the existing armor system, integrating it, and enhancing his own foundation. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, how could he not be pleased? The only thing to note was that black technology smelting consumed an astonishing amount of life essence. If he wanted to optimize a set of powered exoskeleton to a level comparable to the Iron Man suit, Josie estimated it would require at least tens of thousands of life essence. He couldn't do that yet, so he could only proceed gradually. He picked up the mug, the size of a wooden barrel, from the table, tilted his head back, and chugged the full mug of beer, then said to Lena beside him, "You'll be in charge of the meeting with Stark Industries this time. We'll hide, to prevent any unforeseen circumstances." Lena stopped her assembly work, looked up, and asked softly, "Then, sir, what is our main objective this time?" She didn't question Josie's arrangements. With their super soldier physical fitness and powered exoskeletons, her and Ali's individual combat strength was no less than a heavily armed regiment, so there was basically no danger. Not to mention, the newly equipped bioenergy liquid had already been repeatedly tested on various experimental animals and gang members. As long as they weren't instantly headshotted, even if their hearts were blown out, they could recover in a short time. Taking the mechanical parts from Lena's hand, Josie assembled them while explaining, the core objective of this transaction is to acquire Stark Industries' arc reactor and new element technology. Secondly, it's to establish preliminary cooperation with high-ranking SHIELD officials, laying the groundwork for future operations in Sokovia. Arc reactor, new element technology. These two unfamiliar terms made Lena's expression slightly puzzled. However, Josie's subsequent explanation shook her to the core. These two technologies are the most revolutionary and pinnacle achievements of Howard Stark's life, super technologies capable of overturning the entire human industrial system. You should understand that the foundation of modern industrial civilization is built upon energy. The global financial system constructed by the US dollar and oil is precisely the core means by which America controls world hegemony. And the arc reactor is a device that can provide virtually limitless energy. Once we have it in our hands, it can completely subvert the existing energy system. Traditional, inefficient fossil fuels like oil and coal, compared to it, are tens of thousands of times inferior, practically relics from the Stone Age. To help Lena understand more intuitively, Josie simply took out a pen and paper and roughly sketched a set of calculation formulas on the wooden table. Soon, he arrived at the final conclusion. Only 5 original arc reactors, first generation, would be needed to power an entire smart city with over 1 million inhabitants, including urban power, electromagnetic rail transport, solar energy systems, and military reserves. Its volume is less than 1,000th of a traditional nuclear power plant, it doesn't rely on a fission core, doesn't require cooling towers, and has zero radiation and zero leakage. It can be said that this is the pinnacle creation of humanity's energy revolution. After hearing this description, Lena gasped, her head feeling a little dizzy for a moment. Even though she had been a high-ranking national talent in Sokovia and had some understanding of traditional energy structures and nuclear power plants, she still found it hard to imagine that the so-called arc reactor could reach such a terrifying degree. Sir, are you sure you're not talking about a sci-fi movie Stark made? She couldn't help but ask, her eyes full of disbelief. Ha ha. Josie chuckled, not explaining much. Whether it's true or not, you'll know when you get it from Tony Stark, won't you? Think about it, if Sokovia masters this technology, plus the super soldier serum we have, what will happen in the future? These words immediately made Lena fall into a brief contemplation. A future vision emerged in her mind, an energy-independent, rapidly growing military power, enough to allow this war-torn nation to rise again, and even break free from the control of powerful nations. Alright, stop daydreaming. The next second, a light flick to her smooth forehead made the blonde beauty let out a soft whimper. Just as she was about to angrily retort, she saw Josie had already gotten up and was walking out. The guests are arriving, quickly get ready. The future of Sokovia is in your hands. Lena reacted and turned to look at the monitoring terminal on her wrist. The perimeter detection system transmitted real-time images. A convoy was slowly driving along the gravel road leading to the farm. At the very front was a specially modified black oversized SUV, sunlight reflecting a cold gleam off its bulletproof glass. Following closely were 3 seemingly ordinary medium-sized trucks, but in Josie's mental perception, their internal structure was crystal clear, and the heavy alloy frames alone left deep indentations as they rolled over the ground. A total of 34 combat units, well-equipped, with ample ammunition. Armored carriers, with top-grade alloy exteriors, equipped with 3 heavy machine guns, laser weapons, and miniature missile pods, suspected of having a sonic suppression system. The power system far exceeds standard military grade, with a predicted top speed of 150 km per hour. Josie's voice, through an encrypted channel, accurately transmitted information about Stark's party to Lena, Ali, and Joseph's ears. At the same time, relevant analysis images were also uploaded to their armor's auxiliary modules. Good heavens, Stark Industries truly lives up to its reputation as a military contractor. Joseph stared at the monitoring module on his wrist with fervent eyes, clicking his tongue in admiration. The number one military-industrial complex in America, how could they not have some trump cards? Josie didn't seem to care much. His tone relaxed. Besides, Howard was just attacked. They certainly won't let the Soul Heir suffer the same fate. But they don't pose much of a threat to us, just respond normally. The situation was pretty much as he expected. Peggy Carter had indeed come. The motorcade drove into the farm and stopped in the open space in front of the woods. Inside the armored SUV, Peggy Carter sat in the passenger seat, her gaze calmly sweeping across her surroundings. She listened to the communicator's briefing. Electromagnetic radar and infrared scans show only 3 life signals within 300 meters of the farm, and miniature energy sources on the periphery, suspected to be multi-point defense systems. A trap. Peggy frowned slightly, but quickly dismissed the thought. Unlikely. There are no signs of large-scale human activity, and 3 people alone cannot pose a substantial threat. She commanded in a low voice, increase vigilance. Everyone, level 1 alert status. The intuition honed by years as an agent told her that this place was not as peaceful as it seemed. The next moment, click, the wooden door of the main farmhouse opened, and a faint blue light illuminated from within. Accompanied by heavy footsteps, Lena's figure appeared in the doorway. Over 2 meters tall, a silver-blue power exoskeleton covered her entire body, and beneath the full metal mask were a pair of cold, icy blue eyes, exuding an authoritative and imposing aura. On the chest of the armor, a red and white umbrella-shaped emblem revealed her identity to Peggy and the others. Mr. Stark, welcome. Lena's voice, filtered through the exoskeleton system, had a metallic, sharp magnetism, giving it a cyberpunk feel. Seeing that the other party had no intention of getting out of the car, Lena smiled indifferently. If you gentlemen don't mind, we can also discuss things here. As her words fell, a faint hum could be heard. Several triangular-shaped drones flew out of the warehouse and hovered above the open space. Clank, clank, clank. Mechanical joints rapidly operated, and a black metal conference table with several bionic armchairs steadily descended. Following that, portable screens, projection devices, sunshades, and energy modules popped out in sequence, and a complete temporary meeting command area was set up in less than half a minute. This scene not only surprised mechanical genius Tony Stark but also subtly moved Peggy Carter. A concise and efficient yet extremely imposing technological demonstration. It instantly gave everyone a very intuitive understanding of the deep background of the mysterious force known as Umbrella. Peggy's gaze was fixed on the power armor Lena was wearing. The faint blue light emanating from the armor's seams, and the pulsating waves occasionally flashing on the energy core module, she was all too familiar with it. It's actually a cosmic cube battery. Her heart suddenly lurched. Ever since the unexpected incident with the Pegasus project, the cosmic cube had gone missing, and the only existing energy batteries had been sealed in SHIELD's restricted experimental materials warehouse, never leaked to the outside world. How could this thing appear here? What shocked Peggy Carter even more was that the battery was being used in a complete power exoskeleton system. This was something even Howard had given up on. The concept of power armor was first proposed by Howard Stark in the 1970s. However, due to numerous issues such as energy load, heat dissipation systems, intelligent control stability, optical sensing and imaging, and human endurance, it had never been truly realized. Especially the power source. At this stage on Earth, apart from cosmic cube energy and miniature nuclear batteries, there was simply no energy source capable of sustaining a combat-grade exoskeleton for extended periods. And ordinary human physiology simply couldn't withstand the powerful radiation from the cosmic cube or nuclear energy. Moreover, this armor was clearly highly practical, operating on a completely different dimension from any military-industrial system Peggy was familiar with. Umbrella, who exactly are these people? Peggy's gaze was somber, her inner vigilance constantly rising. Looking at the blonde woman not far away through the car window, her unique aura always made Peggy feel unusually familiar, yet she couldn't recall why at the moment. Even though the other party was alone, she appeared remarkably confident and composed. Was it mere arrogance, or did she have some hidden reliance? She took a deep breath, suppressing the swirling thoughts, and looked at Tony beside her, reminding him in a low voice, be careful, the other party is not simple. Pushing open the car door, Tony got out with some effort, with his old butler Jarvis by his side. The two were closely guarded by 4 armed security personnel, giving off a distinct vibe of a criminal organization's secret transaction from a TV show. Lena's eyes were indifferent to this, she didn't care. Please, have a seat. Her gaze fell on Tony, examining him for a few seconds, then she said calmly, Mr. Stark, let's get straight to the point and complete the transaction as soon as possible. After all, your father's condition won't wait. At these words, Tony, Jarvis, and Peggy Carter in the car all felt their hearts skip a beat. From the other party's words, it was clear they already knew about Howard's illness, which further demonstrated the powerful intelligence capabilities of the Umbrella organization. Tony sat down expressionlessly, his tone neither warm nor cold. It seems you know quite a lot. Just a little. Sensing the young man's emotional fluctuations across from her, Lena's lips curved into an almost imperceptible smile. This was the effect she wanted. From the appearance of the exoskeleton, to the drone demonstration, and their conversation. Every step was designed to deepen the Stark side's impression of Umbrella's mysterious power. Thereby gaining control of the negotiations discourse. Ultimately, Josie's side was merely 4 enhanced super soldiers. In terms of genuine overall combat power, they absolutely could not directly confront an established armored force. Not to mention their opponents were Stark Industries and S.H.I.E.L.D. Without absolute strength, one could never be careless. One was a top capitalist giant controlling global high-end military industries, and the other was a global special service organization backed by the American government and possessing countless supernatural resources. If they were truly careless, they wouldn't even know how they died. Come on. No one would actually assume the perspective of a superhero and believe this group would negotiate peacefully, right? They came from arms dealing and intelligence agencies. This wasn't a movie or a comic book. The reality was, without sufficient deterrence, these guys wouldn't talk about morality with you. The moment you showed your head, satellites would lock onto your coordinates. By the time you reacted, missiles would already be at your feet, leaving not even your ashes. After both parties were seated, there was no small talk. They immediately got down to business. Lena raised her hand, took out a metal box, and placed it on the table. Tony looked closely, seeing exquisite silver patterns carved on the surface of the box, with a clear line of English letters in the center. Bioenergy Agent V1.03. This is the bioenergy liquid. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, and he instinctively reached out to pick it up for examination, but was stopped by Jarvis beside him. Tell us, what are your conditions? The old-fashioned gentleman's tone was calm, his demeanor steady yet sharp. Money, power, land, technology, anything Stark Industries can provide, we can discuss. Provided that your technology is indeed effective. That is, of course, beyond doubt, Lena responded calmly. You can test it first. After confirming the agent's effectiveness, we can proceed with the next stage of negotiations. She lightly pressed the lid, and the silver metal box opened, revealing 4 small and exquisite emerald green glass vials lying quietly inside. Tony and Jarvis both showed a hint of surprise at her words, not expecting the other party to so readily produce the agent. However, Lena's next words made them realize that things were not so simple. However, I must warn you. The few agents on the table are currently our entire reserve. She looked at Tony and Jarvis, her tone carrying a hint of teasing. You must test carefully. What do you mean by that? Tony demanded in a low voice. Literally. Lena leaned back slightly in her chair, saying with a half smile, you are a high-tech company, do you really think the production of this agent is easy? The manufacturing cycle for just one bottle of bio-liquid exceeds 2 months, even with sufficient materials and manpower. These 4 bottles are the total output over the past 6 months. The manufacturing cost of every milliliter is over $10 million. After hearing the explanation, Tony and Jarvis's expressions were a bit grim, but they couldn't refute it. Thinking about it carefully, it was indeed not difficult to understand. Such a miraculous biological agent, almost equivalent to a second life, its preparation process certainly couldn't be quick and simple. Just like the super soldier serum that Howard Stark had been trying to restore, it still couldn't be fully replicated after decades, which shows the high technical barrier of biogenetic engineering. But knowing is one thing, accepting is another. Moreover, they couldn't be sure if what the other party said was true, and it was even highly possible that the other party could mass-produce this agent. Especially since this matter concerned Howard's life, they had to be extra cautious. After a brief discussion, Tony, Jarvis, and Peggy Carter ultimately decided to first use one dose for testing, at least to confirm its safety and authenticity. If there were no problems, then they would discuss the subsequent transaction. The experiment proceeded quickly, as S.H.I.E.L.D. was well prepared. Under the operation of professional personnel, one agent was divided into 5 portions and injected into experimental monkeys with different conditions. In less than 3 minutes, the results were out. Whether it was a comminuted spinal fracture, ruptured internal organs, or brain damage, all life-threatening injuries, they were all astonishingly repaired in an extremely short time. The experimental monkeys fully recovered to a healthy state, and even their cellular activity significantly improved. Produced by the infinite furnace, its effects were self-evident. Tony and Jarvis exchanged glances, their shock evident on their faces. They had already seen the video of the paralyzed mouse being healed, but witnessing the effects of the bioenergy fluid in person was still unbelievable. Severe injuries that would normally take dozens of days or even months to recover were compressed into mere seconds. This kind of super self-healing ability, which defied common sense and even provided a slight cellular enhancement, was no longer within the realm of traditional medicine, but rather a cross-generational genetic technology. Furthermore, Tony noticed something else. The actual effect of the current fluid was clearly a notch stronger than the version shown in the video data. Recalling Lena's earlier mention of the scarcity of the fluid, Tony had a theory. The version shown in the video might have been a diluted version or an early experimental product. Or perhaps not even the final product at all. With the current test results, it can definitely treat my father's injuries. Tony gazed at the remaining fluid in Lena's hand, his heart pounding with excitement. No matter what, I must get my hands on this. Now that it's confirmed, shall we proceed? Lena's soft laughter brought the conversation back to the negotiation table. Perhaps because the fluid met their expectations, a preliminary trust had been established between them. The atmosphere on site had somewhat eased. Your fluid is indeed excellent, exactly what we need. Tony steadied his tone, paused for a moment, and then spoke with a serious expression. So, what exactly do you want? At this moment, young Master Stark's face was solemn and earnest. He understood that the transaction had entered a critical stage. As a man surrounded by the halo of wisdom, although still young and green, he had grown up under the tutelage of Howard and Jarvis, making him top tier in all aspects. Tony already had some guesses about Umbrella's intentions. From the initial exchange of information to today's official meeting. From every angle, the technological foundation displayed by this mysterious organization was in no way inferior to the current Stark Industries. Perhaps even more powerful. What the other party wanted would certainly not be simple. After all, this was using Howard's life as a bargaining chip. As Tony's thoughts churned, Lena finally stated her demands. The bioenergy fluid can save your father's life, and what we want is also very simple. The complete design data for the arc reactor, the future city model, from the 1974 Stark Expo, and all of Howard's research data on the Tesseract. Arc reactor, future city model, Tesseract. As her words fell, Tony, Jarvis, and Peggy's expressions changed, each reacting differently. Tony appeared the most confused. He knew a little about the arc reactor. It was a cutting-edge energy theory proposed by his father more than 20 years ago, similar to clean fusion energy, and its theoretical advancement far surpassed the technological level of that era. Unfortunately, this technology remained in the conceptual stage. To this day, there was only a prototype model, housed in the Stark laboratory, displayed as a sample for a public energy research project. He had just reviewed the relevant data from the archives a few days ago. His father had repeatedly sought funding and personnel support from the military and government, but was repeatedly rejected due to the technology's low practical value and uncontrollability. Eventually, the project was shelved and archived. Tony had tried to analyze the relevant theories and concluded, a theoretical miracle, a real-world nightmare. The engineering challenges involved were so complex that even with current global technological development, it would take at least 20 years, or even longer, to truly achieve commercialization. However, this item, which had long been relegated to the Cold Palace, was specifically requested by Umbrella for a trade. Did this mean that the other party's technological capabilities had reached a level sufficient to industrialize the arc reactor? As for the other two, he was even more unfamiliar. Future City Model, Tesseract. What were those? Unlike Tony's confusion, Jarvis and Peggy Carter in the armored vehicle looked solemn. They were more concerned with the latter two conditions, the Future City Model and the Tesseract. As Howard's closest comrades, they knew all too well what these two things meant. The original, arc reactor theory, itself originated from Howard's research on the Tesseract, and its theoretical core was a stable control technology based on a high-dimensional energy field. The new element that truly served as the fuel carrier was hidden within the structure of the Future City Model. This treasure, personally given by Howard to his son. Aside from himself, there were very few who knew about it. Even Tony had to rely on the videotape left by Howard to eventually unlock the relevant information. How did this mysterious, Umbrella, organization come to know about these things? Undisguised vigilance flickered in the eyes of all three. A chilling sensation surged through Jarvis and Peggy Carter's hearts. This could no longer be explained by ordinary intelligence infiltration or technological deduction. The other party knew too much. How did you learn the secret of the arc reactor? Before Tony could speak, Jarvis asked first, his tone as cold as iron, completely devoid of the gentle demeanor of the old-fashioned gentleman he had been earlier. With that question, the previously eased atmosphere instantly froze. Inside the armored vehicle, Peggy Carter immediately ordered, "Activate all weapons, all personnel to battle stations." Click, click, click. A series of gun-cocking sounds rang out. A faint hum came from the vehicle's radar, and the weapon systems were synchronously activated, ready to fire at any moment. In the open space of the farm, 4 security personnel immediately stepped forward, shielding Tony and Jarvis in the center, their automatic rifles half raised, as if a disagreement would instantly lead to a firefight. Haha, no need to be so nervous. Facing such a tense situation, Lena merely adjusted her sitting posture slightly, her expression calm and composed. As far as I know, the arc reactor theory wasn't Howard Stark's unique creation, was it? Besides, how we obtained this information seems to have no direct bearing on this transaction, and I am not obligated to tell you, am I? As soon as these words were uttered, a name immediately flashed through Jarvis's mind. Anton Vanko. The top Soviet scientist who had co-developed the arc reactor with Howard, he was one of only 2 people in the world who possessed partial knowledge of the reactor's technology. Could it be, Umbrella found him? Jarvis speculated, but then immediately dismissed this possibility. No, the new element model was Howard's sole research achievement after Vanko was expelled from the country, there's no way it could have leaked. Suddenly, an even more astonishing thought flashed through his mind. Could it be, the Tesseract, lost in Project Pegasus, fell into the hands of the Umbrella organization, and they also discovered the new element? Otherwise, why would they need that data? At the same time, Jarvis also recalled a previous speculation among them. Could Howard's attack also have been orchestrated by Umbrella, behind the scenes? Was the purpose to force them into this transaction? Still, it doesn't explain how they knew the secret of the future city. This was information that only existed in the minds of the 3 of them and would absolutely not be leaked. Unless they possessed technology to predict the future, or had surveillance devices installed in their heads. In the tense atmosphere, Jarvis looked at Lena and slowly said, "These things are of great importance, we need to discuss them carefully before making a decision." Naturally, I'm not in a hurry. Lena nodded, indicating that he was free to do so. Inside the vehicle, Peggy's brows were tightly furrowed, her thoughts racing. What Jarvis could think of, she, as the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., had naturally already realized. In fact, the most direct solution would be to immediately apprehend this woman and extract all information from her. But once a conflict broke out, leading to the destruction of the biofluid, Howard Stark's only chance of survival would also be cut off. This was a price they absolutely could not afford. Moreover, she was not sure if she truly had the confidence to keep the other party with the forces at hand. Judging from the data transmitted by the detectors, the area around the farm was clearly meticulously defended, hiding an unknown number of energy sources and infrared reactions. Not to mention the high-speed drone swarm still circling in the air, and the combat power of the unknown-powered exoskeletons. The unknown was the greatest risk. Before figuring out the enemy's cards, any rash move could lead to the situation spiraling out of control. Peggy Carter's gaze fixated on the silver-armored woman in the open space. The other party's calm and composed demeanor made it seem as if they had already cornered them. Tony, Jarvis, and Peggy discussed for a long time and finally reached a consensus. They would accept Umbrella Corporation's terms. The purpose of this transaction had always been singular: to save Howard Stark's life. Since the bioenergy serum had proven effective, they couldn't possibly give up this opportunity, no matter the cost. As for the arc reactor technology, the new element model, and the Tesseract research data, while equally important, they were ultimately less valuable than Howard's life. He's my father. Tony's tone was firm, his attitude more serious than ever before. For him, no matter how advanced the technology, it could not replace his father's existence. Besides, he looked in Lena's direction, a hint of confidence in his eyes. These three things are, in the end, just immature prototypes. Even if Umbrella's technology truly surpasses ours, it's impossible for them to complete the research and development in a short time. Based on his understanding of the arc reactor, it was something that current Earth technology couldn't achieve. Unless Umbrella's technological level was half a century ahead of Earth. But was that even possible? Peggy and Jarvis exchanged glances and both nodded silently. A moment later, Tony and Jarvis got out of the car again and walked up to Lena. We accept your terms. Lena's lips curved slightly, and she responded softly, a wise choice. At this point, Jarvis added, the data and models you need are stored in Stark Industries' secure vault. I need to go back personally to retrieve them, which might take some time. Also, the number of bioenergy serums needs to be increased to 7. You should be able to provide them, otherwise, this transaction would be too disadvantageous for us. Howard is important to us, but he is not irreplaceable. Jarvis spoke the last sentence with absolute conviction, his attitude appearing quite resolute, causing Josie, who was observing from a distance, to let out a faint scoff. If one didn't know the relationship between Howard and Jarvis, they might actually be fooled by this rhetoric. Sir, should we agree to their terms? Lena asked inwardly. Heh, a cunning bunch. Just now, Josie had heard their entire conversation clearly. Their psychological price was 5 serums. On one hand, they worried about an insufficient quantity, and on the other, they harbored thoughts of researching and replicating it. Now, they were simply overpricing and then bargaining down. Lena, agree to them, but only give 5, Josie instructed calmly. Understood, sir. 5 serums, precisely hitting the lowest acceptable point for the Stark side. Although Jarvis still tried to secure more benefits, offering to pay for them, Lena flatly refused. Ultimately, both sides reached an agreement. Philadelphia was only about 100 kilometers from New York, so a round trip would only take a few hours. 3 hours later, the midday sun was scorching. A black shadow helicopter roared in, landing in the open field of the farm. Tony and Jarvis arrived with it, carrying 2 silver-gray strongboxes, while several uniquely shaped miniature metal models were placed in the cabin. After Josie's mental scan, the data and physical items were confirmed to be in order. Lena smiled and nodded, handing over the metal box containing the bioenergy liquid to them. Looking at the emerald green liquid in the box, Tony's eyes flashed with intense anticipation. Glancing at the Stark heir, Lena reminded him calmly, actually, you can use it now. The injection of the serum is not restricted by environment. For your spinal injury, it can fully recover in 5 minutes, and there are no side effects. Tony's eyes flickered, but he ultimately shook his head. He closed the lid, placed the serum into a metal cold storage box, and entrusted it to Jarvis. Seeing this, Lena said nothing more. She knew exactly what Tony was thinking, it was simply a lack of trust in them. Pleasure doing business. Both parties shook hands in thanks, and the transaction was officially completed. Drones descended, packing up the data and models at Lena's feet, placing them into a metal box. The two Starks, escorted by security, began preparing to board the helicopter for their return journey. However, just as Tony and Jarvis were about to enter the cabin, a sudden change occurred. Hiss. Lena's pupils contracted. In her superhuman dynamic vision, two sharp bullet heads suddenly appeared from hundreds of meters away in the sky, tearing through the air and creating ripples. Their speed was incredibly fast, arriving in an instant. Their targets were Tony and Jarvis. There, sniper rounds. Her face drastically changed, and she suddenly sprang up from her spot. The silver-blue exoskeleton emitted a bright jet of flame, tracing a blur in the air, instantly covering 7 or 8 Zhang, attempting to prevent the tragedy. But, things happened too quickly. The helicopter was over 60 meters away from her, and facing sniper rounds traveling at over 3 times the speed of sound. Even with Lena's speed, it was too late. Death was already less than 10 meters away from the two. Just as tragedy seemed imminent. TCH. 2 almost transparent streams of air quietly flashed, lightly brushing over the bullet heads. Puff. Bang. 2 muffled thuds exploded, scattering a bit of dirt and metal fragments. The bullet aimed at Tony burrowed into the ground, emitting a wisp of smoke. The one shot at Jarvis directly embedded itself into the helicopter's outer casing, sparking a burst of fire but causing no casualties. Seeing this, Lena secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Sir made his move. At the same time, a mental message entered her mind, making her instantly understand the current situation. Hydra, so it's these guys. Only then did the Stark party react. 4 shield soldiers, looking surprised and uncertain, firmly protected Tony and Jarvis, quickly ushering them into an armored vehicle. Swish swish swish. A dozen fully armed soldiers leapt out of the vehicle, forming a combat formation. With a clatter, multiple M134 heavy Gatling guns extended from the top of the armored vehicle, aiming in the direction of the attack. What's going on? Director, the detector just monitored a supersonic fluctuation, suspected to be a sniper attack. Sniper. How can there be a sniper? Listening to the technical staff's report, Peggy Carter's face darkened, and she immediately looked out the window at Lena. Is it Umbrella? This mysterious force had gotten what it wanted and was now ready to make a move. But the next moment, this conjecture was shattered. The silver-armored woman, surrounded by soldiers in the distance, suddenly let out a cold shout. Watch out. Third-party hostile attack. Gunfire erupted. Da 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 da. The armored vehicle and helicopter were instantly suppressed by firepower, sparks flying and shrapnel everywhere. What's happening? Report. Armored units detected rapidly approaching. Aircraft detected approaching 1,000 meters out. The farm is surrounded. The enemy has activated electromagnetic interference. All satellite communications are down. Who is it? The sudden attack plunged the Stark party into chaos. However, Lena ignored the other party and immediately took action. Her figure moved like lightning, easily dodging bullets as they flew, grabbing the pre-packed data box and city model, and covering dozens of meters in a few steps. Bang! The farm warehouse door was blasted open, and a heavy truck roared out. Read the excellent selection of Taiwanese books. Awesome. The truck bed opened, and Lena flew inside. With a violent engine roar, the heavy truck sped along the broken road at over 100 kilometers per hour, kicking up large amounts of dirt. Bullets struck the vehicle, only producing sporadic sparks. The entire process took no more than 10 seconds. Before the attackers could react, the Umbrella Corporation figure had vanished from sight. Peggy Carter gazed at the disappearing heavy truck, and a voice suddenly echoed in her mind. The enemies you attracted, you deal with yourselves. If there's an opportunity, we'll cooperate again. The enemies we attracted. Peggy's expression changed slightly. What does that mean? This voice had no source, it simply appeared directly in her mind. Is it a psychic? Within Umbrella, there are actually super-powered individuals. In her early years, as a high-ranking official in the Strategic Scientific Reserve, she had encountered many supernatural events, so she wasn't too surprised by this strange situation. However, the meaning in the other party's words was very thought-provoking. This operation was organized by her at the last minute. All the soldiers deployed were her direct subordinates from the Howling Commandos, and no information had been leaked. How could intelligence have been compromised? Moreover, who could organize such a large-scale armed force in mainland America, so close to New York? Peggy clearly saw through the monitor. Hundreds of meters away, in the forest and on the hillside, dozens of black dots were rapidly approaching. 2 tactical armed helicopters cut through the air, and 7 or 8 heavy armored vehicles pushed forward, crushing trees. Dozens of soldiers wearing black combat suits and equipped with anti-materiel gear surrounded the farm from all directions. A battle was imminent. As for Josie and the others, they had already driven the heavy truck through the blockade and sped away. Inside the Hydra command vehicle, Mitchell Carson looked at the rising smoke in the distance, his eyes cold. Trying to run, he suddenly turned around and ordered coldly, "Send out the Winter Soldier. Capture the Umbrella personnel alive and bring back everything they have." "Yes, sir." Inside the heavy truck, Lena and Josie sat facing each other. Several tactical screens around them were displaying real-time footage of the firefight at the farm behind them. Dense lines of fire intersected, explosions soared, and the entire forest seemed to be ablaze. "Sir, where do we go next?" Lena asked softly. Josie flipped through the arc reactor data in his hand, his tone unhurried. "First, we'll go to Washington. Hank Pym's traces have been found there." Hank Pym. Lena nodded slightly, without asking further questions. As for the battle behind them, neither of them paid much attention. Saving Stark and the others earlier was simply to avoid being used by Hydra and causing misunderstandings. Now the deal was done, and the transaction was complete. The 2 parties had no relationship, there was no protection fee, nor any formal cooperation agreement. Whether they lived or died was up to them. For Josie, whether it was Peggy Carter or Tony Stark, neither had anything to do with him. He wouldn't eagerly approach them just because they were main characters in the story. If one were to delve into it, part of the reason he was tortured by Hydra could be attributed to S.H.I.E.L.D. and Howard. If S.H.I.E.L.D. hadn't absorbed Nazi scientists under the guise of justice back then, leading to the resurgence of Dr. Zola and others, they wouldn't have had to face Hydra's infiltration and destruction. As the old saying goes, what goes around comes around. Josie's eyes were deep, and he spoke softly, "But before that, we can collect a small gift." The 2 turned their heads, and the surveillance screen's view switched. In the footage, an unidentified tactical helicopter was rapidly approaching, its quadruple machine guns on both sides of the fuselage began to preheat, and crimson flames poured out. Da da da. Shrapnel rained down, frantically sweeping the road behind, kicking up dust and rubble. Further away, 2 heavily armored vehicles cracked the ground, aggressively pursuing them. Inside the cockpit, Joseph's expression was grim, his hand gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Sir, they want to force us to stop. Ignore them, keep accelerating." Josie's expression was calm, not flustered in the slightest, and he issued an order, "Allie, activate Terminator mode." Allie's hands rapidly tapped on the keyboard. Amidst the dull grinding of interlocking machinery, the heavy truck's top armor plate flipped open with a bang. Click. 4 sets of precise mechanical arms sprang out from inside, and 4 modified large-caliber 6-barreled Gatling guns rose, accompanied by the high-frequency friction of rotating barrels, as heat rapidly surged. In less than 0.1 seconds, the auxiliary computer completed rapid-fire control lock-on. Target. Aerial unit 340 meters away. Fire authorization. Confirmed. At this moment, inside the Hydra helicopter in midair. The Hydra pilot looked at the truck frantically fleeing below, revealing a cruel smile, and shouted to his co-pilot, "Hey, Jack. Aim for the truck's tires and give it a shot, our little prey needs to stop quickly." "Shut up, I know how to." His companion responded coldly, manipulating the machine gun to aim. Suddenly, both men's eyes widened, staring intently at the metal structure rising from the top of the heavy truck, a sense of horror filling their hearts. "What is that? They have heavy firepower. Evade quickly, quickly. Pull up quickly." The Hydra soldiers screamed in terror, trying to change course. However, from the moment Terminator mode was activated, their fate was sealed. Boom. A metal storm roared. The pilot had no time to react, his vision was already engulfed by crimson flames. More than 1,000 rounds per second suddenly poured out, unleashing a monstrous inferno, and the helicopter in the air disintegrated like paper in a downpour. Flames scorched, debris swept. Boom. With a loud crash, the wreckage, trailing black smoke, plunged into the forest. "What happened? Watch out ahead, slow down quickly." Ah! The two armored vehicles behind also did not escape their fate. The machine guns, like divine punishment, pierced through armor, tore apart cockpits, and shattered parts and flesh splattered together. In less than half a minute, the Hydra pursuit team, annihilated. Just as Lena thought the battle had concluded. A Harley-heavy motorcycle sped out from the intense flames and explosive smoke. The engine roared like a wild beast charging. The long-haired rider wore a black tactical mask, his silver metal left arm held a revolving grenade launcher, and his eyes were as cold and indifferent as ice. Inside the truck, Josie's eyes narrowed slightly. This familiar attire and weapon piqued his interest. The Winter Soldier, perfect timing. Bang! With a loud explosion, a thick grenade tore through the air. However, an invisible current of chi suddenly surged, forcefully sending the grenade spiraling back and into the nearby dense forest. It erupted in a wave of fire, with splintered wood flying everywhere. Seeing his attack was ineffective, the long-haired man's expression remained unchanged, and he pulled a specially modified firearm from behind his back. Pulling the trigger, a pitch-black metallic disc-shaped bullet suddenly shot out, drawing a strange arc at low altitude, and flew rapidly along the ground towards the truck's undercarriage. Lena, deal with him. Josie spoke softly, simultaneously spreading his psychic power. In an instant, the air behind the vehicle vibrated violently, and the magnetic disc bomb abruptly froze in midair, as if it had hit an invisible wall. The core components inside the bomb were precisely disassembled, scattering fragments everywhere. The Winter Soldier's pupils contracted slightly, he was about to reload and attack again. A silver-blue stream of light shot out from the truck compartment. Lena made her move. She launched herself like a cannonball, her silver-blue exoskeleton glowing, and slammed heavily into the ground in front of the motorcycle. Boom! An impact wave swept through, churning up earth and rocks. At the same time, a pair of alloy-clad fists tore through the air, carrying a violent current of chi, and crashed head-on into the rapidly speeding heavy motorcycle. A contest between flesh and steel. Almost no one would dare to do such a thing, yet it happened here today. But the anticipated scene of flesh and blood flying did not occur. Instead, the 1,000-pound steel creation was brought to a standstill by this single punch, and the vehicle instantly lifted into the air. Visibly, the hard front of the vehicle continuously twisted and collapsed. Finally, the unfortunate motorcycle could no longer withstand the fierce collision of the female war goddess, and its entire body completely disintegrated, exploding into a sky full of metal parts. With a bang, parts scattered and flew, with fire blazing everywhere. Under the illumination of the fire, a shadow leapt into the air. Using the impact force of the explosion, the Winter Soldier stomped his feet fiercely, his figure darting forward, rushing straight towards Lena. Hiss! The sound of a sharp blade tearing through the air, the blade rapidly stabbing towards Lena's head. Facing such a ferocious assault just now, the Winter Soldier's eyes were like 1,000-year-old eyes, without any fluctuation, let alone emotions like fear. His move was ruthless, showing no mercy. Only to execute the commands in his mind, fully displaying the Winter Soldier's coldness. In the past, countless people had died by his blade, and even the Stark father and son nearly perished at his hands, forging his terrifying reputation. Unfortunately, this time his opponent was neither a politician nor a scientist, but a super soldier, enhanced by serum, just like him. Even stronger than him. Lena's left arm suddenly extended, blocking the incoming blade with a speed difficult for ordinary people to perceive. With a light pinch between her index finger and thumb, the pitch-black dagger came to an abrupt halt, unable to advance another millimeter. Crack! Her fingertips crushed it with force, and the special weapon made of military-grade alloy shattered into fragments like glass. While blocking the attack, Lena slightly lowered her body, suddenly stepped forward, and her side arm directly struck the Winter Soldier's chest. The silver-blue armor hummed, combining the speed and strength of a super soldier. The Winter Soldier was completely unable to dodge this powerful blow. His metal arm was only halfway raised when it was solidly hit by the collision. Clang! The power armor and metal arm collided violently, emitting an ear-piercing metallic clang. Several tons of force transmitted into his body, and the Winter Soldier's entire body trembled. A tidal wave of intense pain spread throughout his body, and he rolled backward along the road for a full 30 meters before finally stopping. PFF'd. He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, kneeling on the ground. The next second, Lena's figure appeared behind the Winter Soldier like a ghost, her iron-like palm locking his neck, and she grabbed him, dashing forward. The Winter Soldier reacted, about to raise his hand to resist. Lena snorted coldly, and her palm suddenly came down, embedding itself into his mechanical arm as if gripping tofu. Crack. With a crisp sound, the metal arm's joint fractured. His combat instincts made him ignore the pain, struggling to fight back, but he was met with another knee strike, heavily hitting his back, pinning him firmly to the ground. The entire battle took less than 5 seconds. The Winter Soldier had already lost the ability to resist. Lena's gaze was cold, her right fist raised high, intending to kill the enemy with one punch, when Josie's command suddenly sounded in her ear. Keep him alive, put him in the isolation box. This Hydra super soldier was, of course, Captain America's good friend, the future Marvel Yongguo, Bucky Barnes. Such a high-value target naturally could not be let go. The rear of the heavy truck's compartment opened, and a specially made electromagnetic shielding pod slid out. Josie precisely locked it with a mechanical arm, injected 2 doses of super hibernation medicine into the Winter Soldier's body, and then gave him an energy serum before quickly dragging him into the shielding pod. Sealed, isolated, shielding tracking signals, all in one smooth motion. After all this was completed, dozens of drones flew out of the forest. A few seconds later, intense flashes of light shone from various parts of the sky, the air rippled like water, and visible electromagnetic pulse ripples rapidly spread. The next moment, within a 5-kilometer radius, all electronic surveillance and communication devices failed, and tactical signals were interrupted. Another helicopter, in pursuit, also crashed into the dense forest amidst sharp alarms, erupting in a towering inferno. Once the fire and impact waves dissipated, the heavy truck and Josie's 4 had completely disappeared. Inside the Hydra command vehicle, Mitchell Carson stared intently at the surveillance screen. The heavy-duty helicopters and armored units were completely annihilated, a strange armored warrior easily defeated the Winter Soldier, and he was dragged into the truck compartment by a mechanical arm, after which the hatch closed. How is that possible? He was briefly stunned, his breathing became erratic, and the veins on his clenched fingers bulged. Winter Soldier. A super soldier, just taken away like that. Rage burned in his chest. Mitchell slammed his palm onto the instrument panel, gritting his teeth. Pursue immediately. I'm going to tear those Umbrella Corporation fools to shreds. Bring the Winter Soldier back immediately, at all costs. Yes, officer. Just as he was about to readjust his command focus and fully encircle Umbrella, the communications officer's face changed drastically, and he reported urgently, Officer. Our armored units are experiencing severe interference. We just detected a powerful electromagnetic pulse, covering a 5-kilometer radius. Communications, radar, and target locking systems are largely paralyzed. What? Mitchell snapped his head around. Our electromagnetic shielding system isn't supposed to be able to withstand this intensity of interference wave, is it? Theoretically, yes, but the opponent's EMP intensity far exceeds conventional values, and there's some kind of waveform superposition mechanism. We can't find the reason for now. Useless. He roared, slamming his fist heavily on the control panel. Just then, another soldier reported with a pale face, Officer, Stark. Stark and his group just broke through the defenses during the chaos and have escaped the encirclement, retreating towards New York. What? Mitchell almost roared. You mean, not a single target was stopped? A deathly silence fell within the command vehicle. Why wasn't Stark's equipment affected by the EMP wave? Perhaps their vehicle system has special protection. Mitchell gritted his teeth, his eyes already filled with murderous intent. Those fooled Umbrella Corporation fools. A moment later, he calmed down again, and commanded with a ruthless tone, notify all units, pursue Stark with full force. At all costs, you must stop them for me. Ultimately, he still chose to deal with the more important target. Under the dark night sky, on a desolate mountain road. Below the low rock wall, 3 heavy trucks were casually parked, their tail lights faintly glowing, casting a dim light. A bonfire flickered in the night wind, dispelling the darkness. Sounds of conversation and laughter emanated from the firelight, and the air was filled with the rich aroma of roast meat and beer. Josie held a golden crisp rack of lamb ribs, slathered with a thick layer of rich sauce, then wrapped in a generous amount of vegetables and fruits. Finally, he stuffed it into his wide mouth, completely ignoring the scorching heat. Crunch, crunch. As he chewed rapidly, the hot grease, mixed with the cool fruits, vegetables, and marbled meat, fiercely collided in his mouth, stimulating his taste buds. After eating, Josie picked up a beer mug the size of a wooden barrel and guzzled it down his throat. He let out a comfortable sigh. He leaned back contentedly in the wide alloy seat, his gaze sweeping towards the video news playing inside the truck. Recently, the East Coast has experienced continuous high temperatures. Today, multiple forest ranches in Philadelphia suddenly caught fire, suspected of causing natural gas pipeline leaks and explosions, resulting in localized power outages and traffic control. Currently, there are no reported casualties, and the specific situation is still under investigation, New York News Times. On the screen, several fire trucks flashed their warning lights. Thick water hoses sprayed high-pressure water jets over 10 meters high, suppressing the raging fire in the dense forest. Heavy police cordon lines were set up at the scene, and investigators were driving away unrelated personnel. Sizzle. The screen flickered, switching to another intense scene. 3 charred armored vehicles sped down the highway, automatic machine guns firing wildly from their bullet-riddled roofs, while miniature rockets occasionally shot from their tails, blowing up the Hydra-armed vehicles that were in hot pursuit. Explosions and gunfire intertwined, painting a chaotic picture that startled large flocks of birds from deep within the forest. It seems Stark's methods are not weak, he actually managed to break out of HYDRA's encirclement. Josie browsed the drone footage while clinking his oversized beer mug with Lena and the others, praising softly. Hydra suffered a huge loss this time. They originally wanted to seize the opportunity to make a fortune and get rid of Stark's trouble, but they ended up losing both the wife and the army. If you ask me, we owe it to our electromagnetic pulse wave. Joseph, who was sitting against the truck bed, pouted disdainfully. He tore a piece of charred lamb leg from the grill, bone and meat, stuffed it into his mouth, and chewed loudly, mumbling, otherwise, for them to try and force their way out of that encirclement, that would be a dream. Indeed. Allie, who was also eating with a greasy mouth, nodded in agreement. Those Hydra soldiers are all fearless madmen, ordinary people simply can't deal with them. Their fight against Hydra seemed like a clean sweep. But that didn't mean Hydra was easy to deal with. Every Hydra soldier was an elite, carefully selected and trained, and with special mind control techniques, their fighting will was terrifying. The 4 of them achieved such results. It was all built upon multiple advantages, including intelligence mastery, technological superiority, and overwhelming power. Alright, Stark's business has nothing to do with us anymore. Let's look at our new target. As they spoke, their attention shifted to another display screen. In the slightly yellowish image, inside a highway gas station restaurant. A middle-aged man in a casual shirt received a packed dinner from a waitress, paid, and drove alone towards Washington, D.C. If Howard Stark or Peggy Carter were here, they would certainly recognize this person. Wasn't it Hank Pym? This genius scientist's whereabouts had been elusive since he left S.H.I.E.L.D. For more than 2 years, besides his irregular appearances at his villa in Los Angeles, virtually no one could track Hank Pym's movements. He seemed to be deliberately avoiding surveillance from the military and S.H.I.E.L.D. Recalling his conflict with the Snake Shield Bureau, Josie already had a general guess in his mind. Pym particles, a creation that could be called magic. Its essence already touched upon the depths of the multiverse, in a sense, comparable to the Infinity Stones. How could the U.S. military and Hydra not covet it? Coupled with Hank Pym's identity as a soldier and a scientist, he was very aware of the U.S. government's inherent flaws, so he would naturally be cautious. Of course, Josie also had another guess. Perhaps Dr. Pym had already detected abnormalities within S.H.I.E.L.D. back then, which is why he chose to part ways with it. If he hadn't preemptively implanted virus programs into various urban surveillance systems and the Pentagon's intelligence network, it would be unknown how long it would take to find this scientist. The drone tracked Hank Pym all the way, finally stopping in a residential community on the outskirts of the city. The screen remained silent for a long time, but the car door never opened. What's this guy doing? Is he going to sleep in the car? Joseph muttered, frowning, with a big question mark appearing above his head. Lena and Ali stared at the surveillance footage, equally puzzled. No need to look, there's no one in the car anymore. Josie had already noticed the anomaly, saying calmly, Hank Pym is indeed cautious, no wonder no one has been able to find him all these years. Switch to infrared scanning and sonic detection. As his voice fell, the drone image quickly switched, and infrared and sonic detection were simultaneously activated, clearly displaying the internal structure of the car. It was empty. Sir, how can that be? Lena and the other two looked surprised, all turning to Josie. Pym particles. Josie explained calmly, a strange particle that can compress or expand the atomic spacing, capable of shrinking a person to the size of an ant, or expanding them into a giant dozens of meters tall. This is Hank Pym's super technology, and it's our next target. After hearing this explanation, the expressions of the others were somewhat subtle. Clearly, they didn't quite believe it. If the super soldier serum could still be classified as biogenetic engineering, and powered armor still belonged to future conventional sci-fi technology. But these Pym particles, changing the size of objects and manipulating atomic structures. This no longer belonged to the realm of science fiction, it was more like a magic system. Sir, are you sure this isn't a plot from some newly released magic movie? Lena looked at Josie cautiously, her tone peculiar as she reminded him. Hee hee. Josie chuckled, ignoring his foolish female subordinate. He forked the last piece of steak from the grill, swallowed it whole, and drank the beer from the wooden barrel in one gulp. Only then did he get up and instruct, pack up, we're leaving in half an hour. Inside the heavy truck, Josie sat quietly. On the computer screen in front of him, a large amount of cutting-edge technological literature scrolled rapidly, constantly being imprinted into his brain. Energy continuously flowed to his brain cells, powering his biological supercomputer with immense operation. As knowledge accumulated, various inspirations burst forth from his mind like a spring. He personally experienced that super genius state of mind. Problems that were difficult for ordinary people to understand their entire lives seemed as simple as 1 + 1 to him. The mysteries of all things in the world seemed to be gradually shedding their mysterious veil. After a long while, a silver glint flashed across his pupils and disappeared. Josie rubbed his brow, exhaled a long breath, and ended his study for the day. Once I fully digest these technologies, the complete version of the powered armor can basically be put on the agenda. During this time, he had been diligently studying technical documents intercepted from Stark Industries, Hammer Industries, Roxxon Energy, and other companies, greatly expanding and enriching his own knowledge base. Now, he was finally about to take another step forward. Unfortunately, the core data of these companies mostly uses physical isolation, so there's no way to get it in a short time. Forget it, with my current technical foundation, I'm already on par with top tech companies like Stark, so I'll get the Pym particles and the Tesseract first, then talk about other things. It's just that time is too tight, and the era of transmigration is also wrong. The prompt from the infinite furnace made him feel a sense of urgency. There were too many good things in this world, and he had too many plans he wanted to carry out. But in just 10 short months, there was simply too little he could do. It was like accidentally entering a free luxury restaurant, dazzling but suffering from too small an appetite to eat everything. I need to hurry up and get the Pym particles within a month, then I can really let loose. Josie's thoughts converged, and his attention returned to the present. To get the miniaturization technology from Hank Pym, I can't just copy the methods used against Stark. This guy is one of the original heroes, quite stubborn and unpleasant, especially after the incident where he was deceived by S.H.I.E.L.D., he probably won't be easy to talk to. Direct contact with Hank Pym is not suitable at the moment. Many pieces of information flashed through his mind as he considered which method to use to achieve his goal. However, a lone wolf isn't difficult to deal with. Moonlight cascaded down, illuminating a row of townhouses. Josie lay comfortably on the floor, his arms propped under his head, the hard wooden boards creaking under his weight. The computer screen in front of the French window flickered incessantly, and the sound of keyboard clicks echoed through the dimly lit room, rapidly recording a large amount of experimental data. Invisible telekinetic energy spread out, penetrating layer after layer of obstacles. It clearly showed the experimental scene in a basement 100 meters away. More than 50 days had passed since Hank Pym's whereabouts were discovered. Initially, after a week of continuous and close monitoring, Josie and his 3 companions basically confirmed that this ordinary residential community in the suburbs of Washington was one of his long-term hidden secret experimental strongholds. After a brief deliberation, Josie chose not to make contact. Instead, he secretly bought a nearby house, quietly hid there, and closely monitored Pym's every move. His powerful psionic energy was almost omnipresent. Even the most precious experimental processes and notebook formulas of the other party could not escape his notice. At first, Josie planned to adopt the same trading method as Stark, trying to exchange miniaturization technology with Hank Pym. The bargaining chip in his hand was naturally his understanding of the quantum realm and information about the Wasp. As far as he knew, this scientist had been trapped in regret and self-blame for a long time due to his wife's disappearance, and his relationship with his daughter had even broken down at one point. Information about the quantum realm was highly likely to touch the other party's emotional soft spot and facilitate a deal. However, after much deliberation, Josie rejected this plan. This method was not foolproof. Hank Pym had been a superhero for a period of time, who knew if he would choose to sacrifice his family for the sake of world safety. The mindset of superheroes was always difficult to fathom with common sense. In addition, Hank Pym had a rather bad temper, and anyone who coveted his technology could be regarded as an enemy, which was not very safe. Josie had also considered using the other party's daughter as a threat. But this method was too despicable, and he directly abandoned it. Finally, he realized that the safest way was not to have any direct contact with the other party. After all, unlike Stark Industries or S.H.I.E.L.D., which possessed vast power, Pym's actions were more secretive, but he did not have a strict defense system. There was no strong security force. A yard less than 20 meters in diameter was almost defenseless against his psionic energy. Just like that, he quietly lurked nearby. For nearly 2 months, he unknowingly mastered all the technology Pym had hidden for many years, including the manufacturing process of the miniaturization particle extractor. In fact, as early as a month ago, he had obtained some samples and successfully started smelting them. Up to now, he had consumed more than 500 life essences, pushing the progress bit by bit. Miniaturization particle, bronze, fragment, 13.14%. It wasn't until 10 days ago that he finally got the complete formula for the particles. The reason he hadn't left yet was, on the one hand, the supporting Ant-Man suit had not been fully deciphered. On the other hand, he noticed that Pym seemed to be developing some new type of device. He planned to take this into his possession as well. In the slightly cramped laboratory, various instruments were neatly arranged. Dr. Pym, dressed in a white lab coat, looked exceptionally focused. At this moment, he was fiddling with a device that looked like a toy pistol, with a red and blue crystal embedded on each side of the gun body. He aimed the muzzle at the ground, then gently rotated the blue crystal and pulled the trigger. A faint blue beam shot out, landing on a small nut. Hiss! Suddenly, a dazzling glow filled the room. The nut, illuminated by the blue light, became ethereal and expanded like a phantom. The next moment, the object, which was originally only the size of a fingernail, instantly grew into a metal giant half a meter wide. It landed on the floor with a thud, emitting a slight tremor. It worked! Hank Pym exclaimed excitedly, his eyes filled with undisguised thrill. Immediately, he re-rotated the crystal and pulled the trigger again. A red beam of light shot out. Accompanied by the interweaving of strong light and the overlapping of reality and illusion, the enlarged nut had returned to its original state, lying quietly on the ground. Looking at the miniaturization gun in his hand, Pym's joy was mixed with a complex expression, and he murmured in a low voice, "If only I had this thing back then. Janet wouldn't have." Seemingly remembering something, the great scientist sat blankly in his chair, his eyes filled with deep loneliness. 100 meters away, Josie watched the entire experimental process. His mental power slowly retracted, and the computer screen on the desktop dimmed accordingly. The manufacturing principle and internal structure of the miniaturization gun had been completely analyzed and replicated by him, without missing a single detail, and stored in his super brain. After spending so much time, I finally got all the core technology. Carefully organizing the technical key points in his mind, a smile appeared on Josie's face. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh. This Dr. Pym was too cautious. He originally thought that he could completely take down Ant-Man technology in at most a month, but he didn't expect it to take nearly 2 months. These scientists in Marvel are really more cautious than the last. They never write down formulas on paper, they all have to remember them in their heads. They're really not afraid of forgetting them one day when they get Alzheimer's. If I didn't have psionic power, it would really be difficult. Josie sat up, a silver light flashing in his eyes. The core principle of the miniaturization gun is roughly the same as the Ant-Man suit. Now that I have completely mastered it, it's time to leave here. But after pondering for a long time, he made a decision. Before I leave, I'll give him a reminder, as a small gift or compensation for taking his technology, otherwise it really wouldn't be right. Moreover, if nothing unexpected happens, I should meet him again after a while, and then it will depend on his choice. With his mind made up, he took out a hard drive from the drawer, wrapped it in a craft paper bag, and then lifted it with his psionic power. The paper bag cut through the night, silently tracing an arc in the air, landing precisely on the coffee table in Hank Pym's living room. After everything was properly handled, Josie took out his phone and dialed Lena's number. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the room through the French window. Hank Pym walked out of the bedroom, dressed in casual clothes, his expression much more relaxed than yesterday. The success of the experiment had relieved his tense nerves, and he no longer had to fear the threats from the military and S.H.I.E.L.D. He had a rare good night's sleep last night. Pym walked into the kitchen, took out milk and bread from the refrigerator, and put them in the toaster to heat. Just as he was about to go to the living room to get the newspaper, his peripheral vision scanned the coffee table, and something caught his attention. He frowned slightly and walked closer to take a look. A craft paper bag lay quietly on the desktop, seemingly containing something resembling a book. When did I buy something? Hank Pym murmured, a hint of wariness rising in his heart. After all, he had once been a soldier, and basic vigilance was essential. He first scanned it with an instrument to confirm that there were no bombs or sedatives inside, and then put on rubber gloves and carefully opened the paper bag. He took out the item and saw that it contained a hard drive. Suddenly, a folded note slipped out of the bag's opening. Hank Pym bent down to pick it up and unfolded it to read the content above. I've taken the Pym particle technology. This is a small token of my appreciation, I hope it helps you. After a few seconds of silence, Hank Pym's face changed drastically, and he turned and rushed into the underground laboratory. He walked quickly to the corner, fumbling to input commands and opened the metal safe. Pym particles, Ant-Man suit, the newly completed miniaturization gun, rough drafts to be destroyed, etc. All key items were still neatly in their original places. Nothing was missing. Immediately, he quickly checked the other experimental equipment and research materials on the workbench, and found that nothing was missing. What's going on? He quickly switched to the monitoring system, pulled up all surveillance footage from last night until now, and browsed the images of the villa's interior and surrounding areas frame by frame. However, there was no abnormality whatsoever. Wait, this. As he continuously slowed down and replayed the footage, a blurred shadow quietly flashed across. Hank Pym's heart tightened, and he quickly increased the clarity and zoomed in on the image, but he only saw a craft paper bag, arcing through the air, accurately landing on the coffee table. No one appeared throughout the entire process. His pupils contracted violently, and a strong sense of horror surged through his body. Returning to the living room, he looked at the hard drive and the note, his brows furrowed into a frown. After a long period of thought, he connected the hard drive to an isolated terminal. After layers of verification and scanning, and ensuring there were no viruses or tracking risks, he opened the files within. A few minutes later, the hard drive content was successfully read. A folder appeared, Conjecture on Subatomic Void and Quantum Realm. Then, Video materials, theoretical blueprints, microscopic models, and complex quantum mechanics equations were presented one after another, as well as a series of theoretical deductions and simulation verifications regarding the quantum realm. This is, at the same time, hundreds of kilometers away on the highway, a silver-gray heavy truck sped past. Inside the truck, Josie sat cross-legged, calmly appreciating the rapidly receding scenery outside, deftly twirling a Zon blue test tube between his fingers. With the PIM particles in hand, the next actions will be much easier. A thought flashed through his mind, and relevant information appeared. World stay duration: 265 days, 03 hours 17 minutes 12 seconds. Rule adaptability: 10.6%. Only 9 months left. He looked up at the electronic clock on the inner wall of the truck, July 21, 1990. Half a year had passed since he arrived in the Marvel Universe. As his thoughts churned, he stopped his movements and his gaze fell on the incomplete serum sample in the tube. Then, he gently uncorked the test tube and poured the liquid into his mouth. A cool, tingling sensation spread down his throat, with a faint, sweet apple taste. The taste isn't bad. Josie smacked his lips, tapped his fingers on the table, and smiled slightly. The restoration of the serum formula will be completely finalized in at most 3 weeks. Since that's the case, it's time to advance to the next step of the plan. His gaze shifted slightly towards the driver's cabin. Lena, how are things going? The relevant materials and equipment were all prepared half a month ago and are ready for use at any time. Lena's reply came from beside him, reporting the results of their 3-person team during this period. The Project Pegasus Air Base, according to the information you provided, has been located by Joseph and Allie. The location is Mount Athena in the Adirondack Mountains, north of New York. The geological structure and personnel deployment have been roughly scouted, and there are no major issues. Additionally, regarding the vibranium clues, we found some information in the black market on the east coast of Africa, and Captain Joseph is tracking it down. It shouldn't take too long. And the girl you asked me to find, we found some clues in San Francisco. At this point, Lena paused, her expression turning serious, but the information we obtained is very vague, and we can't pinpoint the exact source. Furthermore, Hydra's encirclement and attack a while ago seems to have stimulated Director Carter. Recently, there are S.H.I.E.L.D. agents everywhere in major cities across the United States. The current situation is quite tense, so we haven't ventured in rashly. Josie listened quietly while reviewing the trio's mission brief. Extracting key intelligence at a glance, he nodded slightly. Well done, as expected of Royal Special Paratroopers. Hearing his affirmation, Lena's tone was a bit embarrassed as she humbly said, "It's mainly thanks to the intelligence support you provided, sir, otherwise it wouldn't have been so smooth. It's just that there's still no substantial progress on the whereabouts of Captain America. We are currently too short-staffed, and even with the intelligent technology you developed to assist, it's difficult to conduct effective searches. As expected, there's no need to rush." Hearing her mention this, Josie waved his hand indifferently. The Arctic Ocean is so vast, how could we find him so quickly? These matters were not something that could be handled in a short time. He dispatched the few of them simply to gather some intelligence beforehand, just in case. Although he understood the Marvel timeline. This was, after all, a real world, and there were always some differences from the descriptions in movies and comics. Moreover, some of his actions had already greatly influenced the course of events. Unless you are the protagonist, to survive in this extraordinary universe, you either need to be powerful enough or sufficiently cautious. Notify Joseph and Allie, and have them return first. The PIM particles are already in hand. We'll upgrade all our equipment first, and then we'll get busy. Understood, sir. Lena replied with a smile, also full of anticipation. The heavy truck's engine roared, and the scenery outside receded like flowing water. 20 days later, in a secluded canyon. In the simple cliffside laboratory, precisely polished components were laid out on a mirror-smooth stone table. Invisible mental energy extended 10 meters around Josie, isolating dust and creating an ISO 3-level clean operating area. With a thought, his mental energy transformed into tentacles, lifting the parts and assembling them rapidly according to the blueprints. In less than half an hour, an ultra-low temperature thermostat and a laser particle sizer were perfectly formed. Next, after completing a series of complex debugging and confirming there were no issues, he officially connected it to the system platform. I still need a noise analyzer, and I need to prepare more magnetic shielding sleeves. Also, the vibration isolation table needs to be expanded. His gaze swept over the PIM particles extraction device, which was not yet fully assembled. Josie silently calculated the project progress in his mind while manipulating mental energy threads to cut and polish the alloy materials on the rock platform beside him. Tiny metal dust particles floated down, rustling. Precious parts that would normally require top-tier machine tools and a series of complex processes to form, took shape at a visible speed. The high-intensity, high-precision mental energy operation lasted for 2 hours until a wave of fatigue rose from the depths of his heart. Rubbing his temples, he murmured, "Too much mental energy consumed, I'll rest for a while." With that, he stopped his movements and walked towards the temporary rest area nearby. 3 days passed in a flash. Under nearly 20 hours of non-stop effort each day, the PIM particles extraction equipment was finally declared complete. We can begin. Josie's gaze swept over the various parameters on the screen. After confirming everything was correct, he decisively started the experiment. The Tesseract battery operated, and surging electric current poured into the system. On the active anti-vibration platform, the titanium alloy vacuum chamber suddenly lit up, and a series of crimson light points shot out, crashing into the high-purity helium gas in the reactor. Puff, puff, puff. Dense gunshots entered his ears through the cabin, and changes immediately followed. Under a special magnetic field, a cloud of red mist slowly formed in the reactor, condensing into crystalline scarlet liquid droplets, which slid into the collection tube like rubies. The red liquid droplets continuously accumulated. Before long, a small jar of about 20 milliliters of PIM particles was packaged and pushed out. Josie gently took the glass tube and placed it into the miniature pistol he had prepared earlier. He walked into the adjacent testing ground and placed a grain-sized metal fragment on the ground. He raised the gun, aimed, and pulled the trigger. Bang! Light and shadow intertwined, and a deafening explosion erupted. The fragment suddenly expanded to more than a person's height, its sharp edges tearing through the ground, leaving a pitted crack. The scene before him was almost identical to what he had seen half a month ago. What an amazing substance! Josie praised in a low voice. Previously, he had only observed Hank Pym's operations, making it difficult to truly experience the magic-like methods. Now, using it himself, it truly felt incredible. Again. Another blue light shot down, and the metal fragment returned to its original state. After nearly 3 months, I've finally managed to get this thing working. Playing with the miniature pistol in his hand, Josie's eyes gleamed with joy. With miniaturization technology, there's almost nothing on Earth that can threaten me at this stage. I no longer have to hide in the deep mountains and old forests. Many of my previous ideas can finally truly be put into action. Scientific research may not have overly strict requirements for living environments. A secluded and peaceful natural environment might even be more conducive to thought and inspiration. However, the advancement of modern technology has extremely stringent demands on resource consumption. Even with Josie's cheat-like microscopic mental energy, the consumption of various materials for experiments still couldn't avoid the support of the modern industrial system. Just like the PIM particles production device before him. The cost of rare materials alone amounted to over $400,000. If he hadn't occasionally siphoned funds from banks and the stock market, he probably wouldn't even have been able to gather the first batch of experimental materials. However, to manufacture the arc reactor next, this method would not work. To perfect the arc reactor technology and achieve initial commercial application, the resources involved would be at least in the tens of millions. If he were to go a step further and achieve the miniature reactor like Iron Man in the original work, the funds and materials consumed would inevitably be in the units of billions. Over half a year, Josie had gained a certain understanding of wisdom insight. This special ability endowed him with extraordinary wisdom and comprehension ability, allowing him to learn, master, and even thoroughly grasp various knowledge and technologies in a short period. But wisdom and comprehension ability have limits. Currently, he had not reached the level of Tony Stark, who could directly build a miniature reactor and an Iron Man suit from disassembled missile materials in a cave. Perhaps, when wisdom insight advances further and touches the realm of so-called super wisdom, only then would he truly be able to build a reactor from scrap materials. After several days of continuous testing, Josie had a thorough understanding of the external properties of PIM particles, especially confirming the biological adaptability was without issue. Next step, miniaturized suit. He went to great lengths to obtain PIM particles, and their true purpose was to solve his body size problem. In just 10 days, a lightweight bionic suit was completed. This, miniaturized battle suit, had an ordinary appearance, consisting of casual clothes and a gray-black trench coat, with a helmet made from a fusion of bionic skin and metal materials for the head. While its exterior seemed normal, its interior was extremely precise. It possessed excellent protective capabilities, with strength sufficient to withstand sniper rifle fire. Unlike the Ant-Man suit in comics and movies, Josie's equipment prioritized practicality and stealth, allowing it to be used in daily life without becoming the focus of public attention. Originally, he was worried that he would need to constantly wear the miniaturized battle suit to maintain his body shape. Facts proved otherwise. When a biological entity like himself was shrunk by PIM particles, he could stably maintain the changed state without needing additional auxiliary equipment. The reason the suit was indispensable in the original work was twofold. On one hand, Ant-Man needed to frequently change size during combat, and in the process of shrinking and restoring, he had to rely on the suit to maintain the balance of his nerves and body. On the other hand, Ant-Man's physical body was only at the level of an ordinary human, unable to be separated from the suit for long periods. With Josie's current physique, once the transformation was complete, even without wearing the suit, the impact was not significant. Of course, the suit was just a transitional measure. His true goal, from beginning to end, was not to rely on equipment to maintain his body shape, but to thoroughly master this ability. He adjusted the suit's parameters and lightly touched the hidden button inside the cuff. Click. Light and shadow flickered, and the massive figure, over 3 meters tall, instantly shrank to the normal male height of about 1.8 meters. Looking around, the familiar yet strange perspective brought a peculiar sensation. After a moment of concentration, he gradually adapted to the new form. He casually grabbed a handful of alloy powder from the scrap trough, mobilized the internal energy within his body, and lightly clenched his palm. Muscles bulged, flesh tensed. Steel-like muscle fibers subtly vibrated, instantly unleashing immense power comparable to a small hydraulic press. Poof! A wisp of firelight flashed, and faint green smoke escaped from between his fingers. Josie released his grip, and a metal blank fell onto the experimental table, shattering into 4 pieces on the spot. My strength has decreased quite a bit, probably only about 50% of what it was. He looked down at his arm, slightly surprised. However, my physical body strength seems to have increased significantly. As he spoke, a custom-made Nighthawk pistol, which he had crafted, slowly floated up from a stone table a dozen meters away. This special firearm, designed for his 3-meter stature, had a 20mm caliber black muzzle steadily aimed at his palm. Bang! The violent gunshot roared, and the sharp bullet struck his skin, leaving a shallow white mark on his palm. Taking the pistol, he pulled the trigger repeatedly. Bang! 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 Bullets the size of quail eggs struck his forehead and neck, as if hitting an indestructible vibranium shield head-on, flattening into thin metal discs by the immense recoil and clattering to the ground. Defense, it's even stronger than the predicted results by a large margin. Looking at his skin, which instantly recovered without leaving a single scar. Josie calculated the collected body data and initially drew a conclusion. In miniaturized form, although strength is only half of the unleashed form, defense, agility, self-healing, and neural reactions all show significant increases. This situation was exactly as he had previously anticipated. The root cause lay in the characteristics of PIM particles. When the miniaturized battle suit shrinks an object, it simultaneously changes the object's mass and density, and other relevant parameters can also be set and modified to a certain extent through the regulator. Of course, the prerequisite for parameter modification is the body must be strong enough, or undergo long-term adjustment and adaptation. Otherwise, it is extremely easy to cause danger, leading to death without burial. This situation of freely modifying parameters differs from the settings in the Ant-Man film series. It was not even mentioned in the comics. Of course, movies are movies after all, and the true situation needs Josie to judge for himself. In the Ant-Man trilogy, there are also many contradictory settings. Especially the question of whether mass changes or not, which repeatedly contradicted itself across the three films. Hank Pym himself said, Pym particles change the atomic spacing, mass remains unchanged. Yet, the visuals repeatedly contradicted this. First, after shrinking, he rides ants and stands on a toy Thomas the Tank Engine. If Scott Lang's mass was still 80 kilograms, the ants and plastic tracks would be crushed instantly. In Captain America 3, the enlarged Ant-Man snapped off an airplane wing and stomped deep pits in the coastline. If mass hadn't changed, merely being large in size could not provide a tens of thousands of tons lever arm. If mass scaled up synchronously, it would violate the original setting of conservation of mass. Second, density equals hardness. The movie treated shrinking as a universal armor-piercing bullet. Scott, when 1 centimeter tall, shot through a keyhole, shattering the lock cylinder. The physical reality is that only when mass unchanged plus reduced contact area are superimposed can the pressure increase dramatically, allowing the human body to act as a bullet. But conversely, it would also mean he would leave penetration holes directly on any floorboard, car roof he stepped on, yet the floors in the film remained intact. There's also the Wasp shrinking a 60-ton tank into a keychain, Hank Pym shrinking an entire laboratory into a briefcase to carry around. All seem to prove that mass indeed changed, but when mass was needed, it returned. Josie found the answers to these questions in Hank Pym's data. The usual understanding is that the miniaturization field does greatly change an object's mass and volume. For example, a piece of iron weighing only 1 kilogram can reach several tons when enlarged, while a large truck weighing tens of thousands of gin, when shrunk, can be easily lifted by a person like a toy. Hank Pym's research indicates this as a form of adaptive modification. As for the deeper principles, the discoverer himself has not been able to unravel them. However, Josie did have some conjectures. Through recent experimental research, combined with his understanding of the Marvel Universe settings from his previous life, he believes the essence of Pym particles is an energy field capable of manipulating spatial density and mass ratio. Characteristic 1. Quantum gravitational field alters spatial structure, spatial density regulation. Pym particles manipulate the spatial density of an object's location through a special quantum gravitational field, thereby enlarging or shrinking its volume while maintaining its original structure, energy, and material stability. Similar to the spatial treasures in cultivation worlds, such as a storage ring or sleeve dimension. When shrinking, the Pym field weakens its gravitational coupling to the ground, effectively reducing the gravitational effect. Therefore, Ant-Man can ride ants, jump, and glide without causing unreasonable ground damage. During an attack, the suit adjusts the local spatial density, restoring the fist area to normal Earth gravity, achieving the effect of a sudden increase in impact force. This explains why he can punch through a lock cylinder without damaging the floor. Characteristic 2. Mass transfer to microscopic dimension, mass conservation correction. When Pym particles shrink an object, they transfer the excess mass to a microscopic dimension, quantum subdimension. When enlarging, they extract and recover mass from it, maintaining the conservation of energy and mass. If the Pym particles become imbalanced and mass cannot be recovered, it could lead to spatial collapse, or local singularities. The profound mysteries contained within touch upon the quantum realm and the nature of the multiverse. Returning to the effect of Pym particles on biological traits. For inorganic matter like stone or steel, enlarging or shrinking its volume and mass, and whether its physical properties change, has little impact. But once extended to organic bodies, especially the extremely complex and precise human structure, it is far from something that can be solved by simply grabbing a ray gun and going, "Pew-pew," a couple of times. The core difficulty lies in maintaining biological characteristics. Any organism, especially intelligent life like humans, has a complex internal structure and numerous functions, with billions of dynamic physiological changes occurring every second. One tiny error can affect the whole body. Any subtle mistake can lead to devastating consequences. Darren Cross, the villain in the original work, spent a full 20 years to barely succeed in the leap from inorganic matter to living organisms. Especially the maintenance of the human brain system, which is a difficulty that the Ant-Man suit cannot overcome. This is the significance of the miniaturized battle suit utilizing the spatial attribute of characteristic 1 to maintain the dynamic stability of the biological body. Only by prolonged exposure to miniaturized particles, like Hank Pym, allowing the body to gradually adapt, is it possible to slowly utilize characteristic 2 and truly achieve synchronous modification of mass and volume. This can also be indirectly proven by the enlargement function. Ant-Man initially only performed miniaturization. The mass remained unchanged during the transformation process, making gigantification impossible. Because utilizing characteristic 1 for enlargement, compared to shrinking, requires exponentially increasing physical body strength and energy consumption, which normal humans simply cannot sustain. Unless it's a celestial or a being like Odin, it can barely be achieved. And once out of control, it can cause scenes similar to gravitational anomalies, with destructive power comparable to an earthquake. Therefore, only after his body adapted to the modification of Pym particles did he gradually master the technique of gigantification, and each time he grew larger than the last. However, for Joe Z, there was no need to be so cautious. A physical body as powerful as the Hulk allowed him to completely skip the first step and start from the second stage, adjusting parameters as needed. And in the future, when he becomes even stronger, he will be able to achieve transformations at the spatial level. Simply put, with the help of the miniaturized battle suit. The current Joe Z is like a game character, able to use free attribute points to adjust his 3-dimensional attribute values. My current weight is only 300 kilograms, just a quarter of my original weight. But compared to the reduction in mass, my volume has shrunk by nearly 9 times, indirectly increasing my physical body density, which is why my defense has almost doubled. The super-large Nighthawk pistol he personally crafted had destructive power comparable to an aircraft cannon. In the past, even if he could easily resist it with his physical body, it would still leave clear abrasions on his skin, requiring at least 4 or 5 breaths to heal. Unless he activated a peculiar liquid like the Infinite Serum for coverage, it would be difficult to withstand continuous strikes from aircraft cannon shells. Take the U.S. Apache helicopter, for example. Its equipped 30mm chain gun is incredibly powerful. A continuous bombardment for 10 minutes would be enough to cause substantial epidermal damage to his skin. Not to mention the mounted Hydra rockets and Sidewinder missiles. If he were to be hit head-on by accident, a minor injury would be unavoidable. I didn't expect the miniaturized form to actually further enhance my survival capabilities. A look of joy appeared on Joe Z's face as he softly exclaimed, "This step with Pym particles was the right one." In his deep eyes, faint silver light flickered. Psychic power telekinesis swept over his entire body, inside and out, and countless streams of information quickly unfolded in his super brain. Then, he walked to the coffee machine in the corner and unhurriedly brewed a latte. He leaned back in a nearby chair and took a shallow sip. About 10 minutes passed, and once the cup was empty, a free attribute point allocation plan gradually took shape. Joe Z tapped his fingertip on the armrest, browsing the information calculated in his mind. Ignoring strength and agility, simply by adjusting the miniaturized battle suit, my physical body strength and self-healing ability can skyrocket to 4 times their original level. The cost is that internal energy consumption will be more than 10 times that of the normal state, and this state can be maintained for a maximum of 50 minutes. But the benefits are obvious. Conventional human weapons will be completely ineffective against me. Even heavy tanks, and even light and heavy missiles, will basically be unable to harm me. Furthermore, if I forego attack and defense, and reduce my physical body mass to a normal person's 100 kilograms, my speed is expected to rival the fastest high-speed rail of my previous life. If shrunk to the size of an ant, and then superimposed with the suit's flight propulsion, what kind of effect would that achieve? By this calculation, wouldn't my ultimate speed easily break through the speed of sound, or even several times the speed of sound? The more Josie calculated, the more unrestrained the curve of his lips became. Thanks for watching.